Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm gonna be talking about Argus, one of the strongest fighters in the game. In this video, I will also talk about how Argus works in full details, which includes his passive, skills, builds, emblems, combo, along with some tips and guide on how to use him in a match. So without further ado, let's get started with the video. Argus has remained as one of the strongest fighters in the game, and what makes him special is his ability to ignore death. And unlike other fighters, Argus usually depends on his basic attacks in order to deal damage. So, in order to master Argus, you must first understand how his passive and skills work. So let's start with his passive. With the help of his passive, every time you hit an enemy with your basic attack, you will gain 10 malice energy. And the amount of malice energy you have can be seen below his health bar. And once your malice energy is fully charged, your next basic attack will launch a demonic slash, dealing 100 physical damage, and recovering 200 HP. And the demonic slash ignores 40% of the target's physical defense, allowing you to deal more damage. And you also gain 5 malice energy every second. And dealing critical damage will also grant you 5 additional malice energy. His passive is what makes Argus so dangerous, as buying defensive items doesn't really help in reducing his damage. Now, let's talk about his first skill. With the help of his first skill, Argus stretches his demonic hand in the target direction, dealing 125 physical damage to the enemy hit, and also stunning them for 0.7 seconds. And if you use this skill again, Argus will dash and strike in the target direction, dealing 175 physical damage to enemies along the way. This skill is your main source of mobility and escape, and you can also use this skill to chase the enemies, as hitting an enemy with this skill will pull them closer to you. Make sure to use this skill to start a fight, as hitting an enemy with this skill will stun them for 0.7 seconds, which is enough to give you the upper hand in a fight. Now, let's talk about his second skill. With the help of his second skill, Argus strikes with his sword in a target direction, dealing 300 physical damage to enemies hit, and also reducing their movement speed by 80% for 0.8 seconds. And hitting an enemy with this skill will leave a mark on them. And enemies that are marked with your second skill will leave a cursed trail behind. And walking on the cursed trail will grant you 40% movement speed, allowing you to catch the enemy who's trying to escape. And this skill is considered as a basic attack, and it can trigger attack effects from items like Berserker Fury and Demon Hunter Blade. Now, let's talk about his third skill. With the help of his ultimate, Argus removes all debuffs on himself, and enters Eternal Evil State, gaining death immunity for 4 seconds. Which means Argus cannot be killed during this state. And during his ultimate state, 100% of the damage you deal will be converted into HP. In easy words, dealing damage to the enemies during your ultimate will restore your HP. So make sure to always try hitting the enemies when you use your ultimate, so that your HP will be full by the time your ultimate ends. His ultimate is the reason why Argus is so deadly, as you can easily dive under the turret to secure your kills without having to worry about dying. Now, let me show you some combos you can do using Argus. There aren't a lot of combos you can do using Argus, but here is one combo that is always useful in every situation. Remember, you must always start a fight with your first skill, as hitting the enemies with your first skill will give you a head start, allowing you to deal more damage. And whenever you play against enemies that can one-shot you, make sure to always use your ultimate early, as heroes like Guzhan, Eudora, and Paquito can easily kill you before you are able to use your ultimate. So always make sure to keep that in mind when using Argus. Now, let's talk about his builds and emblems. Let's start with his builds. Most fighters in the game usually need only 2 or 3 damage items to deal damage. But since Argus relies on his basic attack to deal damage, you must focus on items that will increase your attack speed, all while increasing your physical damage. And for that, this is the best build for him. This build will provide you with attack speed and damage, along with critical chance, allowing you to burst down the enemies within seconds. And I know most people will ask me whether the attack speed build is good for Argus or not. And to answer that question, the critical build is the best build for Argus. And the critical build is also the most effective build for him. And you can definitely use the attack speed build on Argus, but you won't deal a lot of damage. And if the enemies use tanky heroes, then I'd recommend you to add Demon Hunter on your build. Now, let's talk about his emblems and talents. For his emblem, I'd recommend you to go for the Assassin emblem, as the Assassin emblem is the most suitable emblem for Argus. And for his first talent, go for Swift. Swift will increase your attack speed by 10%, increasing your overall damage potential. And for his second talent, go for Weapon Master. Weapon Master will increase the physical attack you gain from items, emblems and skills by 5%. And for his core talent, you can choose between Weakness Finder and the new talent War Cry. If you're playing against squishy heroes, I'd recommend you to use Weakness Finder as your core talent. But if you're playing against tanky heroes, then War Cry would be a better choice. Now, let's talk about his gameplay and how to use him in a match. During the early game, Argus is really weak compared to other fighters. And you will need to play really safe in order for Argus to work. And remember, you can use your first skill to poke the enemies. But make sure not to take a 1v1 during the early game, as you won't be able to defeat anyone at this stage. So playing safe and farming should be your main priority during the early stages of the game. Now, let's talk about his mid-game. During the mid-game, you should have at least one or two of your core items. And this is the stage where Argus starts to deal damage. And make sure to never waste your first skill, as your first skill is your main source of mobility and escape. So always make sure to save it for the right moments. And whenever there is a team fight, always wait for your teammates to start the fight. And once your teammates start the team fight, make sure to target their mage and marksman, as they are the main damage dealers of the enemy's team. And taking down their mage and marksman would greatly increase the chances of winning the team fight. And aside from team fights, you should also focus on pushing the turrets. And if possible, always try to take down at least the first turret during the mid-game. And remember, Argus is weak against enemies that can one-shot you. And when you're playing against enemies that can one-shot you, you must use your ultimate early, or else you will end up dying before being able to use his ultimate. Now, let's talk about his late game. During the late game, Argus is one of the strongest heroes in the game. And at this point, you should easily be able to melt the enemies in an instant. But remember, you must be really careful when playing against enemies with multiple CC skills. And you must also be careful against enemies that can one-shot you. And your main objective during the late game should be killing their mage and marksman. Remember, whenever there is a team fight, always try to go for their backlines, as taking down their main damage dealers would greatly increase the chances of winning the team fight. And you must also remember that timing and positioning is the key to winning during the late game. So always make sure to keep that in mind, as one wrong move could instantly lead to your defeat. So always wait for the perfect opportunity to enter a team fight, as rushing into a fight without any plans would instantly send you back to base. And taking the Lord should also be your main priority during the late game, as taking down the Lord would greatly increase the chances of ending the game. So, what do you think about Argus? Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments, and consider leaving a like on the video. And subscribe to my channel if you're new. I make tutorial and informative videos about the game. Thank you for watching.